The Ryan Murphy series largely covers every aspect of the famed Milwaukee Cannibal case. This twisted individual is the subject of the new Netflix series Monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer Story, which is both heartbreaking and in-depth. In the eponymous character, played by Evan Peters, the television show explores the life and deeds of Jeffrey Dahmer. The show doesn't shy away from the disturbing facts, but it leaves out certain information about Dahmer's upbringing, his crimes, and the things he kept in his infamous apartment. Ryan Murphy, the man behind American Horror Story, collaborated with the cast alum Evan Peters, who had previously played real-life killers in AHS. To develop the dramatization for Netflix, the Netflix show sure surged into top spots just a few hours after release, and Jeffrey Dahmer has been the talk of the town anywhere you go. However, despite this newfound fame, the Dahmer series is not a documentary, it's a mini-series, and while most of it is factual, some are fictional too. If you're wondering what details you may have missed on the true story vis-a-vis the mini-series, this video is definitely for you. But before we go any further, make sure you hit that subscribe button first and smash that notification bell for more videos like this. Now, let's begin. Monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer Story, left out certain details about Dahmer's crimes through the process of adaptation. While inevitable in portraying real-life events, some details not included provide deeper insight into the man. A prime example is the depiction of the jogger Dahmer stalks. Dahmer does observe the jogger repeatedly, becoming obsessed with the man's bare torso, and he would often hide in order to observe him. Dahmer decides to attack him in what Dahmer would later call his first sincere attempt at violence. Armed with a baseball bat, Dahmer waits, but unlike the series, the jogger never appears. Similarly, the series omits the fact Dahmer fantasized about attacking and holding hostage a hitchhiker for 3 years before manifesting this reality upon his first victim, Stephen Hicks. Shifting the point of view away from Dahmer is representative of Murphy's commitment to a fresh perspective, distinguishing American Crime Story from other true crime serial killer shows. Another one of the inaccuracies some fans couldn't get past with Dahmer is Glenda Cleveland's role as Dahmer's direct next-door neighbor. In the show, Glenda is seen making several attempts to alert the police to Dahmer's deeds while living next door to him. In the first 5 minutes of the episode, you have Glenda Cleveland knocking on his door. None of that ever happened. A journalist who once told Dahmer's story said, "I had trouble with buy-in because I knew that was not accurate." But people are not watching it that way. They're watching it for entertainment. She noted that in real life, Glenda Cleveland lived in a separate building at the Oxford Apartments. Jeffrey Dahmer's childhood. Like other disturbed individuals, Dahmer experienced a difficult upbringing. Dahmer's legs were in casts for the first 4 months of his life, and he wore lifts in his shoes until he was 6. This is in addition to the hernia damage that is described in Monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer Story. The family relocated a lot, and his mother had a mental disorder. The Dahmer family moved into the house shown in the series when he was 8 years old, the parents' 6th house since their marriage. This was their 3rd in the last 2 years. Despite the turmoil, the Dahmers had a second child, and Jeffrey was given the opportunity to name his new sibling David. After seeing Dahmer's joy at seeing the bones that had been taken from his house, Jeffrey would later inquire of his father, Lionel, as to what would happen if chicken bones were submerged in bleach. Lionel, a chemist, was ecstatic and showed Jeffrey how to safely handle the animal bones because he thought it showed Jeffrey's interest in science. Jeffrey would use these preservation techniques on his human victims in addition to the taxidermy procedures shown in the film Monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer Story. When Dahmer was 13 years old, he nailed a dead dog to a tree, impaled its head on a pole, and invited his classmates to marvel at what he had allegedly discovered. From the time he was 14 years old, Dahmer would frequently drink at school. He frequently hid bottles of alcohol, which he referred to as his medicine, in an army surplus jacket, evoking Peter's well-known American Horror Story character Tate Langdon. Dahmer had a very high IQ and was a passionate tennis player despite his subpar grades. The true brutality of Jeffrey Dahmer's crimes. Dahmer started giving substances to his victims because he didn't like it when they moved during physical intimacy and wanted to see them as objects. As his dehumanization progressed, Dahmer began to render his victims incapable in an effort to turn them into whatever he wanted. On his 11th victim, Errol Lindsay, Dahmer used what he referred to as his drilling technique for the first time. Dahmer injected a solution of hot water and acid into the frontal lobes of his victim after taking advantage of them. Some people made it through the ordeal alive, but Dahmer would still harm them in the end. In the course of the show, Jeffrey calls Lindsay's family and advises them to give up looking for him. Similar calls to many of his victims' families were made by Dahmer in real life. Tony Hughes, the deaf aspiring model featured in episode 6, Silenced, was the next victim on whom Dahmer used his drilling technique. On the night that 14-year-old Conorak Synthesophone was brought back to Dahmer's house, police officers casually inspected his apartment and discovered Hughes's corpse lying prone on the floor. In episode 2, Please Don't Go, which focused on the tragic death of Synthesophone, we catch a glimpse of Hughes's foot. Jeffrey Dahmer's House of Horrors. Many of the real crime programs on Netflix are filled with terrifying details, but what was truly horrifying was the seemingly never-ending litany of body parts taken from Dahmer's house. Interestingly, the portrayal of Monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer story, included real news archival film that documented the removal of human remains. It was an outsourced business, not a police team, that handled the hazardous materials. Being only 18 years old at the time, the man who memorably carried the blue barrel down the stairs surely added to the pain Dahmer had already caused his neighborhood. Police discovered an altar that Dahmer was constructing inside his flat, ostensibly in his own honor and to create a place where he could feel at home. 2 entire bones that were intended to be displayed across the table where Dahmer took photos of his victims' bodies were flaked with 7 of their heads. When he was apprehended, Dahmer's refrigerator contained 4 more heads that were going to be added. Dahmer had collected 11 skulls from his 17 victims, out of the total 12 he was after. In addition to providing an exhaustive narrative of Jeffrey Dahmer's life and deeds, Monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer story, gently recounts the experiences of the victims and their families. These elements weren't included in the adaptation because Murphy wanted to focus on the victims and survivors, but taking them into account in Monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer story, uncovers more of Jeffrey Dahmer's tragic tale. Evan Peters, a regular on AHS, has experienced playing tragic, disturbing parts. The fact that Jeffrey Dahmer's narrative could have been avoided is the biggest sorrow. Dahmer was given a parole officer after being charged with wrongdoing. However, they never visited him. Other emergency services were on hand the night Synthesophone was given back to Dahmer and thought he required medical attention, but the Milwaukee Police Department turned them away. Many of the catastrophes that followed might have been prevented. Despite the outstanding praise, Dahmer has received flack for once more romanticizing Jeffrey Dahmer's crimes following its series. One victim's family member complained that they had not been consulted before the show's debut, and she described the entire situation as Netflix's attempt to profit from the tragedy. The first journalist to report on Jeffrey Dahmer's doings is now criticizing the inaccuracies in this new Netflix series and describing a discussion she had with Dahmer. One of the first people to come at the Oxford apartments, where Dahmer committed most of his crimes, was Anne E. Schwartz, a crime writer for the Milwaukee Journal in 1991. A police source has called to inform her that they had discovered human remains inside an apartment. She described being there and seeing the police analyze the scope of Dahmer's atrocities after finding Polaroids of his victims. That's all for today. We hope you enjoyed that video, and if you did, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more videos like this.